Meanwhile, crossing over to Bahrain, where the opposition party there, Al-Wafaq, has criticized the government for withholding the body of a young man killed by security forces 2 months ago. Now, the group issued a statement on the eve of the 60th day that Manama has been refusing to hand over the body of Abdulaziz Al-Abar to his family. Al-Wafaq says authorities refuse to disclose the cause of his death and hence preventing the victim's family to bring the killers to justice. The 27-year-old died on April the 18th after spending 50 days in a coma. He sustained serious injuries when hit by a projectile fired by Bahraini security forces during an anti-government rally. Manama is criticized for its harsh crackdown on dissent, killing scores of demonstrators and arresting thousands, with some being mistreated in custody. Crossing over to Madison, Wisconsin, I'd like to welcome Kevin Barrett, political commentator, to the program. Thanks so much for being with us, Mr. Barrett. Looking at the situation, though, in Bahrain, it appears that we continue to talk about the deterioration of the situation with little being done. Now we see that the regime is actually not even freeing the body of one of the protesters who actually have been killed. What will it take to see a change out of Bahrain to put more pressure on the regime in Manama?
Well, the West is not putting any pressure at all on the regime to open up and be more democratic and respect human rights. It's kind of strange that the Western pressure in the region doesn't seem to be matching the words of support for democracy. We've seen in Syria the support for these Takfiri militants who've destroyed the country. We've seen the West is not open to elections in Syria. They're not interested in supporting the democratically elected Iraqi government now that the Takfiris are moving into Iraq. And in Bahrain, where the Arab Spring really moved to the next level and has continued as a peaceful, nonviolent protest movement looking for human rights and democracy, we see no pressure whatsoever being exerted by the owners of the Fifth Fleet, which is based in Bahrain. The empire runs Bahrain as its own base. They have plenty of clout there. If they wanted to lean on the Al Khalifa dynasty and tell them to democratize and to start respecting human rights, it would happen pretty fast. But it's not happening, and the reason is that the empire is happy to keep people locked up and oppressed in order to have their way with that military base. Bahrain is essentially one big U.S. military base, and the people there come second. It would be nice if this empire, which is primarily the U.S., would change its policies and start dealing with the people of the Middle East as equals and start backing up its words and rhetoric about democracy and human rights with actions. But I don't expect to see it happening anytime soon in Bahrain or even anywhere else, really.
Well, Kevin, looking at something that you've just said, hoping that the United States would actually support those who basically want freedom and democracy. One would think that Washington, if looking at different situations over the course of the years, over the decades, that it would have eventually reached this point in time that they should actually be supporting the people who are actually trying to seek their own freedom instead of going against the wave of the people. Why is it that Washington hasn't learned this message? Because it would appear that it would be better for the United States to have good relations with the people of whatever country instead of an oppressive regime.
Well, yes, I think it is in the U.S. interest to change its Middle East policy and to start actually supporting these movements for human rights and democracy and to genuinely oppose these brutal anti-democratic forces in places like Saudi Arabia and then this new monstrous pharaoh of Egypt. Those are the people who are backed up by the U.S., and there's no reason to. This policy is really an antiquated policy. It dates back to the time when the U.S. was trying to monopolize the oil pricing of the region and, more importantly, to support the Zionists in occupied Palestine. That's the single biggest factor that is driving the U.S. to become the enemies of the people of the region, because the moment the people of the region are empowered and prosperous and peaceful and democratic and stable, that's the end of the Zionist regime. So the Zionists are dedicated to destabilizing the region, and they're using their power in America to push U.S. Middle East policy in that unfortunate direction.
Thank you so much for being with us out of Madison, Wisconsin. Political commentator, Dr. Kevin Barrett.